Hello friends, welcome back to The Generalist. Today I sat down with my friend Mark Keeble, who is an interesting guy who knows a ton about all these esoteric type things. I call them esoteric. Anyway, it's really interesting. We talked about physiognomy, which I just learned what it was. We talked about astrology. We talked a little bit about the cosmos, Theosophy, all sorts of cool stuff like that. I apologize in advance. I wasn't recording in my studio. I was recording at Mark's office, and it's Union Square. There were some sirens. I try to edit out as best I can, but honestly, I was not able to edit out the whole thing. It only shows up like 3 times throughout the podcast. My apologies. I will try to do better next time to not have that stuff in there no matter where I record. But, yeah. Anyway, enjoy the podcast. Check out our website at thejournalistpodcast.com, and at the end of the show, I will tell you how you can help out the podcast and tell you about the next episode coming. So, Welcome to The Generalist, a show with a man who knows very little bit about a lot. A man who specializes in nothing in particular. A man who knows that he knows nothing. A man who can be described as non-specific. And to top it off, he narrates his own intros. This is The Generalist with your host, Saul Ackerman.
Alright, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, pleasure.
This is Mark Keeble. You're an acupuncturist, herbalist. What other things are you? Let me take this off. I'll make noise with it. Is it
I would say that I'm a physiognomist.
What is a physiognomist?
Okay, so physiognomy, nomos is to know things, right? To know, and physio is is like the body, knowing the body, right? Or seeing the physiology, right? So physiognomy is really, so like for instance, I read palms, right? And so reading palms is a physiognomy of the hand, right? You read faces, that's face reading, that's a type of physiognomy.
How does that differ from being a psychic? Because people associate the reading of palm with being a psychic.
It's not at all. It's not at all. It's an extremely graphic presentation of a person on the hand, right? So you can see by the lines, you can see by the texture of the skin, you can see by the shapes, all the various shapes of the hand, how the knuckles are, how the muscles are, by the plushness or the flatness or the hardness of the skin, all kinds of different, it tells about a person's character.
So what sort of things does that tell you?
Oh, it reveals the whole person in so many ways. It's actually rather frightening.
That's actually kind of cool. Have you, I'm sure you have, but I'm asking you for...
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'd just be like, all right, good, we're done.
Yeah.
But have you seen a lot of, like, you talk to somebody about it and they respond like, holy crap, how'd you know that? Or that...
Well, I used to do that, right? I started reading palms when I was 22 years old and got very excited about the whole thing. And that's when I started studying astrology at the same time, right? I started studying Western astrology at the same time. And, so I would go off and gather people around me and get them to let me read their palms to them. And I would preface it by saying, well, I'm going to probably see things about you that you may not want other people to know, so let's do this in private, this kind of thing, right? So, yeah, it can be very, very revealing, right? It's also, it's judgmental. It's really
judgmental in what sense?
It's because you're actually judging somebody. You're saying, oh, well, you're weak-willed, right? Do you want to really say that to somebody, right? Oh, your heart is broken. You're going to have, very difficult relationships the rest of your life. You're going to have a hard time with relationships and forming them and keeping them, right? It's tough stuff to tell somebody.
Yeah, I will say it's interesting because a lot of times you hear people talking about psychics and stuff and everything is positive.
Yeah.
And that just seems, and again, I'm not equating you with a psychic.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when you see things like that, or even palm readers, and everything's positive, it's like, well, that can't be true.
No, of course.
There's got to be a balance.
Yes.
How'd you get into reading palms?
Oh, I think I must have seen a book in the library. Okay, I was researching astrology, and so when I finished college, I was flat broke. It was the early 80s, and there was a recession, and I was flat broke, and I had to move back home and live with my mother. And I went to my local public library that I went to as a child, and they actually had a couple of books on astrology. So all these, these occult, I guess that's what you call them, disciplines were all in the same section, the same one shelf of the library, because they only had, 24 books, right, or a dozen books, right?
Right.
And I must have seen it there, and that's how I got started.
That's interesting. I happen to be a fan of astrology. I'm not one to ever say that anything is true or anything is false, which is problematic for people, but nonetheless, I do find a lot of interesting things. The way I view it, and you'll tell me the way you view it as well, is not necessarily as a way to tell the future. That I'm a little bit more hesitant to fall into. But because I view, in my own philosophy, I suppose, everything as being one thing, meaning the microcosm and the macrocosm being essentially the same thing, you're part of everything and everything is part of you, then the idea that things are where they are at the moment of your birth is sort of a map of who you are. A lot of people hate that. Obviously, a lot of people are immediate right to say that astrology is bullshit.
Well, it puts a lot of weight on one single event.
Yeah.
Right? And there, once you're born, there's many, it's constant events that occur within your life. You fall asleep, you wake up. I mean, there's events. Why would that be so important? Right? And that's a perfectly legitimate question.
So why do you think it is so important?
Because I would say over the test of time, over the 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 years of human history, it's just proven itself over and over again to be really significant moment, right?
So what do you say, and I don't really agree with this, but I'm going to play devil's advocate anyway. What do you say to the people that say, not that it's just bullshit, because obviously people are always going to say everything's bullshit, but people who specifically say that is, I forget the word, there's a word to say that general things that fit everybody.
Yeah.
I forget. Yeah. So what do you say to people who say that?
Well,
there's a word for that.
Yeah, there's a word for that. But there is, because there is a little bit of truth to that, right?
Right.
Because you are generalizing. You have 12 signs, you have, 9 planets, 10 planets, 15, but it depends on how many planets you want to put in there, right? And, there's going to be a certain amount of similarity and familiarity, right? Not all Scorpios are alike, right?
Right.
Right, et cetera, because there's all kinds of mitigating factors that changes a Scorpio into a Scorpio with a Libra rising, and a Scorpio with a Libra rising and a Sagittarius moon, and then there's a Scorpio with a Libra rising with a Taurus moon, and when you start to look at the depth of what something like astrology does, or palm reading, or whatever, you can say, here's the differentiation, here's the subtleties, and then it focuses on a person, because what we try to do in society is so what we try to do in society is we try to give something simple to people to grasp onto. So you say, there's the 12 signs of the zodiac, and you were born from this time to this time, and you're going to have these characteristics. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Right.
And so this is why somebody will say, well, this is all general stuff. This is all just anybody could have this, and anybody could. Well, that's true, because there are 12 signs to the zodiac, and all the planets can be in one of those 12 signs, and you're getting characteristics from any of those 12 signs, right? So
I think there's a big part of it that people don't understand or don't care to understand. And again, I have no problem with people saying that astrology is bullshit. I mean, do you?
Yeah.
I don't care. But what I don't like is people automatically erasing something without looking into it. I've at least looked into it.
Yes.
And again, I'm not saying it's 100% true, although I do find a lot of interesting coincidences. But people don't understand that it's not just the sun sign. When people say I'm an Aquarius, or I'm a Libra, or I'm a whatever, they're talking about their sun signs, and you have a sign for each planet, and all those interplay with each other in different ways. And that's your astrological chart.
Right,
it's not just, I was born in Aquarius.
And on top of that, not everybody is able to express all the potentials that are in their chart. Okay? Two people born on the same day at the same time, okay? Twins, for instance. They're going to have different destinies, okay? Because they're actually a unique soul that's going to take those potentials that are in the chart, and they're going to do something with them or not. And not everybody has the capacity to use all those things to the fullest, right? So especially with the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Okay, some people just do not have the capacity to incorporate those energies into their lives because they're just too, quote unquote, far out, for instance, right? And somebody else born on the same day at the same time is going to actually be able to channel those energies in because they have more consciousness, they have a longer soul path, they've had more incarnations, they have, a greater capacity to make use of their potentials, right?
Interesting. So it goes into the idea of past lives and being reborn and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Which is still a taboo, almost a taboo subject in the West.
None here.
Yeah, right.
It's true. In the East, it wouldn't be considered a taboo subject at all. It's almost like a given.
Yeah, it's like a given.
I mean, especially when you're talking about Buddhism. I don't know. Does Taoism really talk about?
Not really.
Yeah, not really.
The Chinese are very the Chinese culture is very light on that kind of thing. It doesn't really. They don't go there in a certain way. It's not like it's yes or no. It's just, well, we don't really have that.
Yeah. I find it interesting because I think Western religions do have the concept of reincarnation, but even though, and I'm talking about Judaism, Christianity, I'm not sure about Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, for whatever reason, it has fallen off by the wayside where even people who are religious have brushed that part off, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
I think it just doesn't fit into the scientific mold of things.
No, it doesn't, because you can't scientifically, given the kinds of tools that came out of the 19th century and the 20th century, you were not able to, quote unquote, prove these things. But, the proof is in people's experiences with each other, with our relationships with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there are those crazy videos of, like, the kids who are, like, 4 years old and know all these crazy details of some random person's life.
Yeah, there was some young man who knew exactly what happened to him. He crashed a plane. He was a pilot in World War II, right? And knew the whole thing and was very, very self-aware of the whole thing. Yeah, it's quite incredible.
Yeah, all those things are so interesting. I think he knew where he crashed and they took him out in the ocean to where it was and they held some sort of funeral for him. And he knew all about the planes and he knew the people that were there. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Most people don't have that kind of recall. They have vague recall, right? They have vague recall.
You think most people have some level of recall?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In what sense?
All the time, right? Sometimes they find it in dreams, but I think a lot of it happens in our interrelationships with each other because we reincarnate in groups.
Yes. I've never heard that before.
Yes, we reincarnate in groups. Okay, these people that I meet are people that I've known from lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and that's when it's like you meet somebody and you say, "Oh my God, I feel like I've known you since I was a kid."
Right.
We just get along so great, and the conversation's really amazing, and it's just very familiar. I mean, this is the idea of, okay, we've been here together before, right? Yeah. Whether as friends, in family members, in relationships, in business dealing. I mean, who knows? In our various human relationships.
So, what do you think? This is going to be a crazy question, but what do you think is the nature of the world or the universe, if you will?
Right, is life, right?
What do you mean by that?
That is the nature of the universe. It's this constant. I mean, this is one of the interesting things that Einstein brought forward: is that energy can never be created nor destroyed, right? But energy always has motion, right? It's always in motion. So neither can it be created nor can it be destroyed. So that there's always this constant cycling that goes on, right? And this, to me, is what life is, right? And then life has this process, right? So, and one of these psychic things that is common in our culture, Western culture, is tarot, right?
Right.
And if you look at tarot, if you pull out the major arcana and look at them in a certain arrangement, you'll find that it's just a document of this cycle of life, okay? And that's how I read tarot. I've been reading tarot for many years as well.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think I've done it once with you. Or no, I didn't do tarot. I think you did my hand for a little bit. We didn't get too deep into it.
Yeah. So these are just ways to chart the cyclicity of life, right? So to me, what is the cosmos? What is all this energy that's around us? These solar systems and galaxies and clusters of galaxies. This is all just expressions of life, right? Because it's there. It's just present.
So, where does consciousness play a part, in your opinion, in these cycles of energy?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what kind of purpose do we see with this constant revolving or cyclicity? One could say it's evolution, right? You could say it's just evolution. And then consciousness is something that increases as we go through these cycles and we have experience. We gain, experience is knowledge in action with a result, and that's
right.
Wisdom, right? And then wisdom is experience, and then and then you have memory of this, right? You have memory of it, and it comes back again in your next lifetime. I mean, we're talking about humans, but all things evolve.
Right, of course.
All entities evolve because everything is alive, right? That's an idea called hylozoism. Right? Hylozoism, like everything is alive. All these particles around us are alive. Their consciousness is not the same as, say, our consciousness, okay? But they still have a consciousness, right?
What about the idea that consciousness doesn't exist within a person, but rather it sort of fits into the hylozoism kind of thing, but where we are all part of one massive consciousness?
Yeah. And that's called the oversoul, right?
The oversoul. Wow, you have terms for all this. I didn't know there were terms for these things.
Yeah.
The oversoul?
Oversoul, right?
Where's that from?
Okay. It's been around for a long time, but a lot of this comes from Theosophy, okay, which I started. So I picked up astrology and palm reading and tarot. Well, actually, I started with tarot reading when I was in high school. My brother bought me a tarot deck, right? Because he was very, very attracted to the symbology. He just latched onto it. He knew something was there, and the two of us saw it together at a store, and then he sneakily went and bought it for me as a Christmas gift, right?
Right.
So I started reading cards in 1980, right? And I was in college, and he was just a senior in high school or something. So then the palm reading, and then astrology, and then I got turned on to the work of Alice Bailey, right?
I don't know Alice Bailey.
Alice Bailey she's passed away. She channeled many books. They don't call it channeled because she wasn't really a channel. She was amanuensis, right? She was able to record the thoughts of an ascended master and wrote 14 or 16 or 18 books for him. And then she wrote several books on her own, right? This was in the early and mid 20th century, and she passed away in 1949. Right?
Okay. What's an ascended master? I've heard the term before, but I'm not exactly familiar with what an ascended master is.
So let's look at the kingdoms in nature, and that's a really easy way to get this, right? So we have the mineral kingdom.
Okay.
Right? Okay, and mineral consciousness. And then the mineral consciousness will evolve itself and go into plant consciousness, okay, for our plants, right? And plants are very, very highly evolved creatures, right? But they have a certain kind of evolution, and they have a certain kind of consciousness, right? Which is, not so, it is what it is.
I'm going to come back to that because there was a really interesting experiment about plant and consciousness, but let's go on.
Yeah, and there is a consciousness there, but it's of a particular type, right?
Yeah.
So then the next kingdom in nature would be the animal kingdom, right? So, and we can see amongst animals, even among insects and microbes and things, that there is some kind of conscious life there. But again, it's not highly evolved. It's not very sophisticated. It's not very refined. The next kingdom in nature would be the human kingdom, right? The human kingdom has its particular level of sophistication and intelligence and insightfulness, right? The next kingdom in nature is the kingdom of what's called the kingdom of souls, right? And that's the kingdom of the hierarchy or the ascended masters. Right?
I see.
Okay, so when a human being, somebody like Confucius, right? Somebody like Confucius, right, has basically perfected who they can be as a human being. They go through a transformation, and they move on to the next kingdom in nature. And that's what happened with humans. Humans used to be animals. Okay? We still have a certain amount of animal consciousness and a certain amount of animal body and this kind of thing, but we are also much more evolved than animals. We're not like animals.
It's interesting. It's similar to the Taoist idea of the Taoist immortals. Because
Yes,
people always
it's the same thing.
People always picture the immortals being people who live forever, but the Taoist immortals are people who actually just have lost their physical form.
Yes, they've lost their physical form because they've evolved beyond the human state into the next kingdom of nature.
All right. So she wrote all these books that
she wrote all these books that she, let's call it channeled because it's easy, right?
Yeah.
She brought through, right? She would just sit there and the master would talk to her. And and she would just type it all up. She'd just write, type, and they do dictation for, a certain amount of hours per day, and whenever she could fit it in her schedule.
Right.
Yeah. So she was based here in New York, actually.
And what sort of stuff does she talk about?
Everything. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievably dense. It's very difficult to read. It's very, very far-reaching. It goes from the tiniest little atom to universal consciousness, right, and everything in between. And there's book after book after book. There's 2 books on psychology. There's a book on astrology. There's a book on healing. Okay, there's a book called A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which is basically a book on physics. Okay, and talking about physics. Physics not here in the physical, but physics in the ethers, right? Okay, and also talking about planets and solar systems and consciousness and God, and religions and dispensations of human beings, which we would call races, right? And back then, in that language, in the early 20th century, they would call them races, right? Because now I wouldn't call them that. I think that's the word race brings up an ugly connotation.
Yeah,
right?
I actually,
right?
yeah.
Right. I would prefer to call it a dispensation of consciousness, right? Because the previous races, like the Atlantean race, right? The Atlantean dispensation was a different level of consciousness than we have now. Right?
Have you ever read Graham Hancock?
No.
I bring this up on the podcast all the time. I think you would love this.
Yeah.
Graham Hancock.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yes. Yeah. So he writes his most recent book, which is the one that I read, is called Magicians of the Gods. I bring this up on the podcast so much, and he talks about essentially the existence of advanced civilizations pre-Diluvian times, and he goes through all the science of why there most likely was a deluge.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. It's really all scientific.
Yeah.
And then I think, if I remember correctly, he starts alleging certain things based on different archaeological digs and stuff. It's very cool. I think you'd like it.
Yeah, and this is what Theosophy's been talking about since Blavatsky back in the 1800s, right? And Blavatsky brought a lot of this forward. She was incredibly controversial. I don't know if you know Helena Blavatsky.
Also don't know.
Okay, incredibly controversial person. Again, she was based here in New York for a long period of time, and she wrote a book. She wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine. And before that, she wrote a book called Isis Unveiled, right, which is this idea of unveiling all of this material that humans really weren't ready for until the 19th century. Okay, because we've evolved enough, we've got enough educated people that enough literate people that people can actually understand this and grasp this, right? The science revolution was humongous in the 19th century, and so this was a reflection from the masters to be able to say, hey, okay, now you can learn this further information. And then in the 20th century, we have Alice Bailey and her work, right? Which was channeled through a master whose name is Jwal Khul. Right?
What happens when you have, and I don't know if this even happens, I just assume that it does. You have different people who channel, who channel information, and they have information that's completely opposing to each other.
Yeah, that's because it depends on the clarity of the channel.
I see.
Right, each person is a little bit different. Some people are very astrally oriented. Some people are physically oriented. Some people are mentally oriented. And the clearer the channel is, a lot of times, there's a lot of discarnate beings out there who, want to talk to people here because, they got big fucking egos and they're just, slobs, and they find somebody who will listen to them because that person has psychic sensitivity. That doesn't mean that psychic is either clear or, channeling anybody that's particularly interesting or channeling somebody who's right, this ties into this whole idea of ghost possession in Chinese medicine, right? Where, here's a discarnate human being who insists on pushing themselves into somebody else's life and taking over their consciousness. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the same kind of thing happens in a much more mild way with a lot of psychics who are channeling people. They're like, oh, I'm talking to and they're saying that this is going to happen and Well, of course the information is conflicting because, we're just flawed human beings talking to each other through this, ethereal contact. Of course there's flaws. Of course there's no consistency.
Right. Makes sense.
Right?
So how do you determine when a channel is to be trusted or not, or is that just something you have to decide?
You have to use your own sense of discrimination. You have to use your own sense of intuition and say, I think this is nonsense.
That's right.
I think this is this little nugget here sounds okay to me. I mean, that's what our job is, to discriminate, right, and to be judgmental.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
So, can anybody become a channel?
No.
Do you think? No.
No.
So.
No. I mean, maybe in other lifetimes, but I think that certain people are on that path to be mediumistic. Okay, and that's kind of their role as they develop as a human being, because we have different roles that we should play. Not everybody's going to be the famous sports star. Not everybody's going to be an opera star. Not everybody's going to be, a successful business person.
So some people just have skills in that,
yes,
in that area that other people don't. Interesting.
Exactly. Okay.
Because I see a lot of times people who talk about, not necessarily channels per se, but about metaphysical stuff is like, oh, everybody can do it.
No.
You don't think so?
No, because I think it depends on that person's substantial makeup.
Marcus Aurelius, for example, has the idea that lower things exist for higher things, and then higher things exist in consciousness. I think he's talking about higher things exist for each other. Do you view it that way in the terms of the different kingdoms of consciousness, as you call it?
Well, I think that that view, if what I'm grasping or getting from it is really more of this idea of humanity has to dominate the lower. And I think what we really need, or what we should be doing, is cooperating with the lower, right? The lower kingdoms in nature depend on us for their growth, okay, for their conscious growth. That's why we have pets, okay? Because here we're taking this animal into our lives, and we're virtual gods to them. We're like gods to them because we're like off in some other world, and they're just sitting there going, meow,
right,
woof woof, and we're have all this complexity flying around in our energy fields, and they see it and they feel it and they know it, but they can't really grasp it. But they're inspired to look towards that human for grace, right, for consciousness. And I think the same thing happens as we go backwards in the kingdoms of nature.
Interesting.
Right? So like when humans mine, when we go and dig into the earth and we mine and we refine all this things, and this is also a way to communicate with the mineral kingdom, right? And bring it into a greater state of consciousness.
So you don't think that mining is necessarily a negative thing?
No.
So long as, I guess, you're not causing excessive amounts of damage.
Because what are you doing? If you're causing damage to other humans, you're causing damage to animals, you're causing damage to plants, right? You're causing damage to the environment, the atmosphere, and things like this. Well, that's not good, because that's not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing that on a constant basis. Look what's happening in Standing Rock.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Right? I just read an article today. The humongous gas leak that took place in Southern California. Yeah. The company wants to open up that reservoir again and pump gas back into it again, even though for months and months and months it leaked methane into the atmosphere. I guess it's
for money reasons.
I don't know. They don't want to go find another place to store their natural gas.
The stuff that's happening in this country with corporations and stuff is insane in my opinion.
It's excess. It's excess beyond. It's complete stupidity. So, I mean, and the thing is this, it's this, that's a linear way of thinking, right? And they're not paying attention to cycles. They just think they can keep going in one direction and more, and consume resources and make money, and consume resources and make money. But that's not how life operates. Life operates in cycles.
Sure.
Okay? It's boom and bust. It's, birth, growth, and senescence, right? And then death, right? And then rebirth. And then you just keep going around these cycles. And that's what they're not paying attention to. And it's really, truly, to me, this is a philosophical problem that we're living with and a consciousness problem, right?
What do you mean by a consciousness problem?
Well, if you have a consciousness of this cyclicity, and that is the rhythm of the universe, right? Galaxies spin around.
Yeah.
Okay? When you have that you say, oh, why am I, wanting my business to go up, 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 up? No, it shouldn't have to do that. It should go in some kind of cycle.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. I have this thing about the way we treat, the way we do money, for lack of a better way of saying that, in the society. Mm-hmm. And I like to talk about it first in the way that people get punished for it. Because you have people like Bernie Madoff, for example, who stole a bunch of money, albeit from rich people, and that's why he got in trouble. Probably, a lot of people steal money from not rich, like companies steal money from people all the time and don't get in trouble. Yeah. The banks, case in point. But, and then we all get angry that people are doing this, or we get angry that the companies or the corporations or the banks are screwing over the little guy. And while it is their faults, and sure these people should be punished for what they did because it is pretty shitty, I almost don't blame them because we have set up this carrot and stick kind of idea in not only in the United States, in the whole world at this point, that money is everything. We pretend that, money isn't everything, but at the same time we're like, well, are you successful? That means, do you have money? Right. Everything is always money. Make sure you have money. Make sure you go to school so you get into good school so you have money. And I know that not all societies have been that way. For example, I know Rome, for example, I don't know, but from what I understand, Rome, for example, yes, there were a lot of people who wanted money, but money was, and this is not better, it's just different, money was a way to get into politics. Politics was the big thing. Power was the big thing then. But you have societies like, and again, to the best of my understanding, the Lakota. I know that something deer, lame deer. Lame deer has a whole thing about money being useless, and it is. We just created this idea, and it's basically a little notebook where people keep tabs.
Yeah, it's kind of like a liquid or something. It's just a way to make. It's a medium of transformation. It's a medium to be able to bring energy from one area to another, right? There's one thing in the Bailey books that said, it says money is an energy in service, right? So what is money supposed to do? It's supposed to serve us, right? It's supposed to be something that gives us an opportunity to do something for ourselves or others, right? Which would be healthful and growthful for the planet, right?
In theory, yeah.
Right, in theory, right?
Yeah.
But it can be corrupted, right? Because,
I would argue that it can't not be corrupted.
Well, this is the temptation of the lower self and the lower drives and a less refined consciousness. It's like, I'm scared of the world. I got to accumulate. I've got to have defenses. I'm going to be attacked. Somebody's going to attack me. I'm going to attack somebody to get what they have. This whole idea of warfare and city-states and all these kinds of things. What would they? Why would you attack a state? To plunder it for its resources, right? So that you would have more somehow, and the grandiosity develops, and all of these distortions that happen in the astral body, right, in the body of the emotions, just go and tumble and get bigger and bigger, and they turn into these massive thought forms that people turn around and worship.
So do you think I don't want to say started off, but let's say at some point we were at a higher level of consciousness and we've plummeted since then?
Well,
or we've been working sort of in a straight line or cycles? Or
I think it works in cycles, but for instance, if you've ever read there's a Chinese medicine text called the Neijing, right? And,
Yeah.
Right, and the first 2 chapters of the Suwen, which is one of the parts of the Neijing,
Which translates to simple questions.
Yeah, the simple questions, right? It talks about the people back in antiquity and how they lived in harmony with nature, and they lived to 100 years, right? And the idea of living to 100 years is not so much a goal, but just that you followed the pathway of life.
Yeah, I always don't take those as actual numbers, but as like, oh, it's been 1,000,000 years. You like that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And that's the idea. It's symbolic of living in harmony with the rhythms of nature, right?
Yeah.
And when you do that, you create a very positive energy around you, and then the rains fall on time, right? And the winds come when they're supposed to come, and the insects come in when they're supposed to, and the harvest is done at the right time, and life operates in your favor.
We're very much now. Well, I'm talking from the city. I'm sure there's people who are more the case, but we are not very in tune with the cycles of nature. Even though, on the other hand, I have this thing where, going back to the idea that everything is one thing, we're inseparable from nature.
Yes.
So in a way, no matter what, we are nature. Even in these buildings that we build, that's all part of nature. We're not like creating something out of nothing.
Right, exactly.
Everything is nature, but we have sort of separated ourselves. And I think that Western philosophy has played a big part in this, in the idea that everything is separate.
Yes.
So we are somehow separate from nature, and therefore nature is our enemy, and we need to protect ourselves from it. And I'm not saying that nature isn't dangerous, but it's also... I was just listening to another podcast where they were talking about it, and we're always like, oh, nature is the most dangerous thing ever. It's always a fight for survival. And it's like, well, it's a fight for survival at the last minute of life, but the rest of the time it's pretty chilled out.
Yeah, exactly. And
I mean, yes, you need a hunt.
That's a very 19th century, to me, that's a very 19th century point of view that, and you see this in, the National Geographic things, it's always the struggle and the fight and all this, and the animals clawing at each other. Well, that's just drama.
Yeah.
99% of the time, the leopard is sitting around on its ass, licking its chops, sleeping, relaxing, and then every once in a while they go out hunting, and that's natural. They're not out hunting all the time. They're not fierce all the time.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency, and I don't know if this is human nature or if it's the way we've learned, like by not by nurture, to look at the more negative side of things.
Yeah,
and I think that's probably because we're trying to protect ourselves, so it's always like, well, the positive things, they're good, but you have to pay attention to the negative ones to make sure that you're not damaged. But that has fallen to our whole way of thinking, and we always look at the negative.
Well, it sells. It sells.
How do you mean?
Well, it sells.
Oh, it sells. I thought you meant like cells, like body cells.
Yes, SELLS.
Yeah,
it sells, right? It's a way to get people using fear, right? The fear of the unknown, or fear of the bottom falling out, right? Oh my God, I'm not going to have any more money. How am I going to pay for my this? How am I going to... all these kinds of fears, right? And this is a way to keep the population in a state of suspension so that the upper classes can run rampant. And
do you think that's an intentional meaning? Do you think that's a planned thing? Because I tend to think it's not that. I tend to think it's not that planned. It's more like, it's not like people sitting in a room being like, "Oh, this is what we should do," but more like sometimes subconscious things, and sometimes just like, well, this is what's going to be good for me. Let me just move this around like this. And you have opposing people trying to do opposing different things. So individual moves by individual people cause larger problems,
effects,
like fear, but not necessarily people sitting in a room being like, all right, and now we're going to make them do this.
But there's a history to this, right? There's a history to this behavior that has been replicated over and over again because it's successful to people who think that that's successful. Right? And so, we're seeing this succession here in the United States from Bush to Obama, from Clinton to Bush, Bush to Obama, Obama to Clinton again. We're going to see this succession of this same mentality because, they're on top and they can make things work for themselves, and the people don't matter.
Yeah.
They're just, circuses.
So going back again, I'm not so sure that it is exactly that. I think it ultimately happens. But I think, depending on who, sometimes no. But sometimes people go in there with good intention
let's say Obama, for example. I don't know that he did go in with a good intention, but I'm going to assume for the benefit of the doubt that he went in with good intentions, and you just get corrupt. There's no way around it, because you have to do a little bit here to try and do some good. You're like, I need to do some good, so I'm going to have to give a little bit here to do here, and then you start doing this and owing people favors, and before you know it, unintentionally, you've become part of the corruption that you probably went in there trying to stop.
Right.
So again, not people necessarily sitting in a room being like, all right, we're going to fuck everybody over.
Right.
But actually people trying to do their best. And as I say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Although, so is the road to heaven, I guess.
yeah, exactly. You know.
Yeah.
So, but...
By the way, I'm releasing this, I think, on Election Day.
Oh, I do believe that these are conscious decisions that people make. Sometimes they're brought in an unconscious way, and they just keep going with it. You know, it's like, well, here's the rhythm that's been established in my society, and this is how I'm going to become successful, and so I'm just going to keep doing this, you know?
But I sometimes wonder if I were put in the same exact situations with the same exact circumstance, and I'd like to think that I wouldn't end up in the same place, because obviously we all like to think of ourselves as the best human being possible, but I wonder if I would fall into the same situation, or how hard it would be not to.
Right. Well, you don't know until you're there.
Right.
But, you know, you get somebody like Jeff Bezos, right, who owns Amazon, right?
Yeah.
You know, here's a guy who's very ambitious, you know, very ruthless, right? He has chosen to be ruthless. He doesn't have to be, but he has chosen to be, right?
Unfortunately, I both agree and disagree with you. I don't think people need to be ruthless. But on the other hand, it almost seems like to make it here, you do have to be ruthless.
Well, that's the value system. That's the
carrots and sticks I was talking about before. Yeah,
that's the value system that has developed before. And so, you know, the path to success, if that's what you think success is to be that.
So how do you get out of that? How not as a personal thing, which as a personal thing we could talk about also, but as a societal issue.
I just had this conversation. I keep having this conversation over and over again, and especially in just the last couple of months. This is about consciousness, because morality is a level of consciousness. Okay. When you're less conscious of the people around you. You're less conscious of the environment. You're not going to take care. You're not going to be following the rhythms of nature. You're going to not pay attention to them. But if you become conscious of it, then you say, "Oh, look. Oh, things need to be done like this. Oh, well, I need to share with these things with this people, and then they're going to share with that person, and then everybody kind of gets." You know, along, and things start to work a little bit better, and there's less tension in the world, and less anxieties, and less fear. That's the way I think this operates. I think it's truly, and this is why education is so important, because it raises consciousness.
So you think you can only do it on an individual basis to affect the large scale? Because how would you put it in place for people to start doing that, other than people doing it individually?
Yes, exactly. It does have to be an individual thing, but we can do this as a society already, right? I mean, religions have done this, right? Governments have done this. You know, political movements, social movements have done this. Look at the civil rights movement and what that spurned in the United States. First, there was the civil rights movement, then there was gay lesbian women's movement, then gay lesbian movement, and you know, and then all kinds of things that have come from that. You know, and then that's one raising of consciousness by respecting people rather than putting them down and destroying their lives.
So, do you think overall we're actually heading in a good direction?
Yes, absolutely.
You do.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people feel the opposite about how things are going.
Well, that's because I think more and more of the ugliness is coming to light.
Interesting. Okay? So you think because we're going in a good direction, everything's being the light is being shown upon.
Yes.
Is that a word?
Right.
Shown upon the things that are not good.
Right. When you open a door and light goes into a dark room, you get to see what was in the shadows. Right? I see. And that's what I think we're seeing now. There's more and more consciousness in the world. Humanity is developing. Education is widespread. Look at the internet being widespread. Look at cell phone service being so widespread all over the world. We're all interconnected now. That's a tremendous grid of light.
It's almost like it's almost like an expression of the collective consciousness.
Yes, exactly.
Which is interesting.
Exactly, and that's a huge boost. That's a huge raising upwards, right? So so what do we see? We get to see all the ugliness that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's almost like you're trying to push out the ugliness, and it's holding on tight and making it bigger, more noise and all that stuff.
There's going to be resistance. It's like, trying to tell an oil company, well, you shouldn't be in business anymore because you're destroying the planet. And they're like, I'm not going to give up what I have. This has been good. I'm making money. My shareholders are making money. Why would we want to change our business model?
So what do we say to people who are allegedly higher consciousness people who say, well, yeah, but I still need to make money, so I should charge for what I do? Which I do, by the way.
Right, and that's fine because
as
until
an acupuncturist,
it depends on how the society evolves. I think eventually, at some point in time, the idea of money will be greatly reduced. It will just be this kind of little fluid that we can use to exchange things. But for the most part, we're going to learn how to share our resources so that everybody gets exactly what they need, and they don't want, because of their consciousness, they don't want more than they actually need to evolve and to love and to be.
So, on the other hand, don't you?
Yes, it's a great ideal.
I'm an idealist, by the way. So,
but this is what in many years of studying all these occult subjects, in studying science and physics and sociology. I was a political activist for many years, right? I was an AIDS activist for many years, right? I was a gay rights activist for a few years. I've done a lot of diverse, various things, and this is my conclusion: is that at some point in time, if we're not going to destroy this planet, and not going to destroy ourselves, and go into some ugly black hole of viciousness, we are going to have to learn how to recognize what is most valuable to us. What is most valuable to us? Love, right? Security, right? And rhythm, a pleasantness. Okay? And we're going to have to use less resources because the planet is breaking.
Do you think there's any truth to the Indian idea that I forget what they call them. I think they call them karmapas. Not karmapa. That's a Tibetan Buddhist term. I'm sorry. Yeah. Kulpas. They call them kulpas.
Yes.
Where there's different kulpas, and right now we're in that negative kulpa where everything's horrible.
The Kali Yuga.
The Kali Yuga. That's what they call it, right?
Yes. The dark age, right? Yeah. Yeah, because we're in a great transition. We're in a humongous consciousness transition right now, and it's kind of like we're at the end of this dark age, right? Right. So, there's a new inauguration coming along. It's talking about going back to astrology.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So we've been, the cynetic vernal point has been passing through the sign Pisces, right?
What's the cynetic? Say that again.
Cynetic vernal point. Right?
Cynetic vernal point. Yes. Tell me more.
Okay. So the cynetic vernal point follows the wobble of the Earth, right?
Oh, is this the precession of the equinox?
Yes, the precession of the equinox.
So where the sun is, the sun moves backwards through the signs over a 2,600 year period or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
26,500 years, something like this.
Right, 26,000.
Okay, so the vernal point, vernal meaning spring.
Yeah.
Right? So are you using that first day of spring as, that point has been passing through the sign Pisces. So in astrology, we consider that the age of Pisces. Okay? Right. And very, very soon, that is going to pass into the sign of Aquarius.
So it hasn't yet passed into Aquarius? It has not
passed into Aquarius.
Oh, so people always say this is the age of Aquarius.
Well, there's always going to be this, slow transition out and slow transition into, right? And they're going to cross over, and the energetics are going to cross over. Okay? So we're sensing the Aquarian consciousness, and that's very much clearly happening. Okay, and we're leaving behind the Piscean consciousness, and people are hanging on to that consciousness of individuality and dreaming idealism and, one-pointed, very narrow vision on things, right? It's produced a lot of wonderful things, but it's time to move into Aquarius now, okay? So these are these changes in the ages, right? Now, a yuga is a much bigger age.
Yeah, right? I think it's 4,600,000 and somewhat years.
Yeah, and some are longer than others, and some are shorter than others, and da-da-da-da-da. There's a whole thing to this, right? It's enormous, right? But we're in this particular rhythm, which we can actually grasp consciously. It's 26,000 years. Not so hard to grasp, right? And a period of about 2,200, 2,225 years, right? per sign, right?
Right.
Okay, and so this is why right now we're seeing such turmoil in the world, is that we're really trying to make that transition into Aquarius. Right?
So do you think the turmoil is sort of us fighting against the change in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. People cling to what they know, right?
Which is such a weird thing, because everything has always been change, and yet through the entire existence of humanity, we've always been fighting it.
Right, but that's the difference between the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy. In the East, change is what keeps you alive, right? By following the rhythms of nature and by being fluid, that's how you survive. And in the West, it's always been about gathering and hunkering down and creating security, right? And having rock hard, very solid, I know I have this, right?
Yeah, it's problematic in my opinion.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But that's the West. The West is a lot about discrimination, right? The East is not so much about discrimination. The West is about this precision and exactness, right?
Which, by the way, has had very many positive things come out of it as well.
Many positive things. Look at the world of science and technology has come out of the West. It didn't come out of the East.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. It did not come from India. It did not come from China, right?
In my opinion, the like sort of philosophy, and this is my personal opinion. Obviously, a lot of people would disagree with me, but like the beautiful, like not interesting. They're both interesting because I like Western philosophy also. But like the more beautiful nature type things, philosophies, and living in accordance with nature came out of the East, while the scientific revolution came out of the West. And they're both important.
Yes.
And I'm not one to say like, oh, science is the worst. We should just live in the jungle. I would love to live in the jungle. But I only say that because I've never actually lived in the jungle. Right.
Right. The jungle is a rough place to live.
I'm sure.
It's not pretty.
Yeah.
So, so this is this transition that we're making, and that's why there is turmoil. Okay, and people's lives are disrupted, and we're not living the way we used to, and we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to go back. What we can value things from that past, right? And we can value things that are eternal, right? Like living within the rhythms of nature. I feel personally that's an eternal value, right? And having a contact with the natural world and not just living in a synthetic world, right?
I totally agree with you, and I try to do that as well. But how do people who are unable to leave the city because they're working 24/7 to make money and do stuff, how do they become, or how do they go to be one with nature or to learn from nature when they're stuck in this
rat race?
Right. Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Right. It is. It's a rat race. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And to what end? I don't know.
Well, meditation is huge now. I've never seen so many people come up to me and say, and I started meditating recently.
Yeah, that's true. I see that a lot also.
It's really, really tremendous. And I think that that's a response to, because it's a way to go in, not so much in yourself, but into the energetics of the world. And that is what nature is, isn't it?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of Eastern philosophical concepts seem to be becoming more and more popular in the West. Like, even if you look into psychology, a lot of the new, and I could be wrong, my girlfriend's a psychologist, so we talk about this stuff a lot, but a lot of the new forms of psychology, and new I mean relatively new, forms of psychology that are being practiced, because not that many people practice the like Freudian type armchair psychologist kind of stuff, but like CBT and CBT is one of the major ones that has a bunch of different little ones. I'm butchering this, but essentially the idea that a lot of Eastern concepts are falling into psychology and into day-to-day living, like meditation, like you say. And I find that very interesting that that's happening.
Well, it's really East meets West, right? It's this synthesis, right? It's synthesis of these two dispensations, the two types of consciousnesses are getting to know each other and valuing each other's positives, right?
Do you think that's also why the East seems to have, I don't want to say lost, but seems to be ignoring their ideals? Or do you think that has to do with the fact that the Western the sort of Western influence on the world has always been like, we're correct, everybody else is wrong, and you must do what we do, and everybody else was like, well, all right, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because they're getting used to our ideals, right? And we're getting used to their ideals. Their ideals happen to be much more about rhythm and pleasantness and about smoothness and not making waves, and our rhythm is not really a rhythm. It's more like like an axe going forward and chopping, I mean, it's just like very, very solid.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, and then, we've created a base and we've got troops here and we're gonna
I mean, not that the Easterners weren't familiar with war.
Right, but it's not practiced like we do. It's not practiced quite the same way. So, but the Western style is also brings a lot of entertainment, okay, and a lot of flash, a lot of pizzazz. I mean, people all over the world consume American media products all the time, everywhere. It's shocking.
Yeah,
it's shocking. It's like, and I don't understand why. But this is something that comes from our Western culture. It's very Western. Certainly theater is not just Western, and opera is not Western, but this is the product that people want. They want.
I mean, I think it also has to do with the fact that I think it has a lot to do with Hollywood and television and those developments being more monetarily funded in the United States than anywhere else. So people see the things that are coming out of here just because it's easy. If you're an actor or if you're a producer, not a producer, if you're a director or something like that, not the easiest place to work, but the easiest place to be recognized once you do have work is in the United States. So our stuff, because any movie has tons of advertising in it that most people don't even realize is in there, including myself. Yeah. What was I saying? It doesn't matter. So why don't you give me a couple of recommendations of books that I can read about the stuff you were talking about? Then promote your practice, promote whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
If you'd like.
All right. So there are a few books. Alice Bailey wrote a few relatively simple books that are easy to understand. One is called The Consciousness of the Atom, which really helps to lay things out. There's another one called Initiation, Human and Solar, and that helps you to understand the whole idea of hierarchy in the kingdom of souls and how that relates to humans, the human kingdom. And there's a third book called Letters on Occult Meditation, which teaches you a lot more about this whole world of energy and philosophy, not just meditation, but it's based on, the book is based on teaching you about how to actually be a meditator.
Oh, cool.
Right? So
I'm going to check it out for sure.
It's a really interesting book.
How about on the astrology end? Would you recommend any particular book?
Well, there's so many new books out there. I don't know. I mean, I studied books that were... The most recent author that I studied was Robert Hand, and I loved his work. And
I have one called The Inner Sky by... I forget the name now. I'll put it on the show notes.
But there's a lot of different authors, and you kind of have to find who you like, right?
True, that makes sense.
There's Liz Green. I studied with Mark Edmund Jones, but he was, early 20th century. Yeah. And Alan Leo and a lot of the older astrologers from the early 20th century. That's where I learned. Yeah. But, there's so many more things out there now that I don't know about.
All right. I know you need to see patients in a minute, so why don't you promote whatever you want to promote, if you'd like. Okay.
I have a practice in Union Square in Manhattan, and I am happy to see new patients on occasion. Not too many, but
Go ahead. If you like, I'll put a link to your website on the...
Oh, I don't even have a website.
No website, even better.
You know why? Because I don't really... I've been in business a long time and I get plenty of referrals, but
I see.
People are certainly welcome to contact me.
Do you want me to post your card, or do you? Okay, so I have your card. I'll take a picture of it and I'll post it on the show notes.
Sure, sounds great.
Okay, I hope you get some patients.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this. Really, really appreciate it. Let me shut this off.
All right, here we go. Let's see if we can do this right. Firstly, check us out on Twitter at The Generalist PC. Check us out on Facebook at The Generalist Podcast. Check us out on Instagram at The Generalist Podcast. Check out our website at thegeneralistpodcast.gmail.com. See, I can't do it right every time. Check us. The website is thegeneralistpodcast.com. You can donate there to help out the show on the donate page or on the show notes. You can donate via Bitcoin, you can donate via PayPal, you could, I don't know, donate via just buying stuff on Amazon. It's not really donating, but it does help out the podcast. So if you're going to buy something on Amazon, feel free to use our links. If you're going to buy one of the books that we talked about, go on the show notes and buy the book we talked about through our links, and it'll hop off the podcast as well. Tongue-tied. Other than that, the next episode is in 2 weeks with a gentleman by the name of William Bushell. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If not, next episode I will be pronouncing it right. He is a scientist who studies all sorts of adepts at stuff like yoga, martial arts, and all sorts of other things like that, and we're going to talk to him about it. And it'll be fun, I guess. I hope. Other than that, I don't know. I feel like that's it. I feel like I'm missing something, but sorry about the, oh, that's what I'm missing, but the sirens. You'll know already by the time you listen to this, because that beginning. Anyway, enjoy. See you in 2 weeks.